Introduce our speaker.
Hello, everyone. I am Kim McKean. I'm an assistant professor of theater here at UTEP. I am so thrilled to introduce you all to Greg Ramos. Greg and I met 2 years ago now, or is it 3? I think almost 3 years ago, doing our certification in the Meisner technique. We spent a few weeks together in Oregon and connected over El Paso and the border in his time here. So to tell you a little bit about Greg, Greg Ramos is an actor, director, playwright, and theater educator originally from Los Angeles, California. He completed his MFA in playwriting at UCLA and studied acting at Playwrights Horizons in New York and privately with Academy Award winner Ellen Bernstein. He performed in national tours of The King and I with both Yul Brynner and Rudolf Nureyev. He also appeared in national and European tours of West Side Story, among many other theatrical credits. Greg has directed plays and musicals at numerous professional theaters and universities. Most of his original work is based on interviews. 2 of these are solo performance plays, Border Stories and When We Danced, which he performed at arts venues and theater festivals around the country. His play for young audiences, Cantos de Josefina, is available through Youth Plays. Greg is certified in the Meisner acting approach through the True Acting Institute. A proud member of the Lincoln Center Directors Lab and Actors Equity Association, he is professor and chair at the University of Redlands Department of Theater Arts in Southern California. His most recent work in progress is a play about gun violence and community based on interviews he conducted in El Paso, Texas after the mass shooting in August 2019. So without further ado, join me in welcoming Greg Ramos virtually. Thanks for being here, and then take it away, Greg.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Kim, professors, I should say Professor Dominguez and Professor McKean, for asking me to participate in this series. And thanks to everyone in the Dean's office who helped to make this happen. These things don't happen magically. And I know a lot of people did a lot of work to make this happen. So I want to thank both of you and thank all of the folks that helped support this moment of my sharing my artistic work with everyone. I also just want to take a moment and recognize that I'm coming to you all from the lands of the Cahuilla Indians here in the desert in Southern California. So what I would like to do to start is, just overview, I'm concentrating, the topic of the lecture is transforming life into theater. And I'm going to present a little PowerPoint to start and take you through some thoughts that I've had recently. I think like all artists, our thoughts about how we do the work is ever evolving. And I find myself reflecting a lot around this juxtaposition between big picture ideas and very intimate, small personal ideas. So with that, I'm going to begin sharing my screen and take you to the land of PowerPoint. So hopefully people can see that. Is that seeable for folks? Give me 1 second here. Okay. So can I get a Kim or Adriana, just give me a yes, I can see your screen?
Yes, you're good.
Beautiful, thank you. So that's me and the topic of our lecture, transforming life to theater. So I want to start out by saying why theater, and I want to talk a little bit about the power and the purpose of theater. Theater, I love to start with this quote. Those of you who worked with me or studied with me know that I love this quote, "The universe is made of stories, not of atoms." That's Muriel Rukeyser, who was a poet. I really find that to be inspirational in terms of how I see the world and how I approach making theater. And we'll come back to that concept as we go through the PowerPoint. Stories provide a fundamental structure for human understanding. So in the arts, in the same way that a statue has a structure or a framed piece of acrylic artwork has a structure that conveys meaning. Structure is a fundamental component of drama that allows us as humans to understand much larger ideas. And it's understood through the mechanism of causality and effect. One thing happening, which makes another thing happening, which makes a final statement. So theater provides us a space to gather to experience story. We've seen this throughout history. And even in modern day, oh, look, that looks very much like the Weiss Family Theater at the University of Texas at El Paso. Same concept, but we are still part of our culture is that we continue to hold the social practice of theater with us as a gathering place to experience story. And we're used to visiting various kinds of modern theaters. I wanted to put these couple slides in here because you see we're living in clearly in a time of a pandemic, and there has been a lot of conversations around the notion that maybe theater is dying or theater has been dying because we've been gravitating to other forms of media representation of story, like what content on Netflix or movies that are created or other kinds of web series and these sorts of things. But although those kinds of stories are predominant in our culture and valid in our culture, I just wanted to point out the notion that theater and theater artists will refuse to die. When theaters shut down all over America and all over the world, I'd venture to say, theater artists found ways to continue to do the work that they do. These are a couple of examples of Zoom theater projects that have recently happened that are created by and for theater artists in an attempt to keep the medium alive, even though it's in this new digital form, and continue to present notions of story and story structure to audiences. So civilizations, we know, are built on stories. We've seen this all throughout time, that stories are key in our understanding of what it means to be human and how we build civilization. And in fact, how we build culture. We know that culture is based on stories. As we see evidence in different types of stories and how they are manifest in particular nuances of culture. Some of these may look familiar to us. Even history itself and how we understand and position ourselves in history is related to a large degree this continuum of time. So we come to understand ourselves as humans in the universe, in this continuum of time through the structure of story. Each one of these images probably evokes some kind of story in our minds. So I've started to think of these rather like vibrating spheres of different elements of how stories reverberate through our universe. There's the sphere of civilization, there's the sphere of culture, the sphere of history, and there's the sphere of the personal and how we come to understand ourselves as having our own story. And I'll come back to that in a moment. So throughout time, we have tried to understand the relationship between story structure, the importance of story as it exists in our cultures and in our lives, and how it is effective in communicating meaning. And we've seen various theorists try to, and rather successfully, some of them, delineate what successful story structure is. Aristotle wrote about it in the Poetics and provided us with notions of what character means and what essential elements are needed in theater to make it effective. This is a diagram of Freytag's pyramid, which we use in traditional drama and when we try to ascertain story structure, an exposition, an inciting incident, rising action that leads to a climax, falling action, and resolution. And interestingly, and maybe obviously, but excuse me if I'm stating the obvious, this is actually kind of an interesting structure and paradigm that we see in the experience of human life. I want to talk a little bit about Joseph Campbell and The Hero with a Thousand Faces, one of his books. That's been very inspirational to me recently. I've been thinking a lot about Joseph Campbell and the notion of the hero and this paradigm that Campbell explains in The Hero with a Thousand Faces. We're very aware of the notion of how hero manifests itself in stories throughout history, but even in contemporary stories where we have a hero who goes on a journey, who is faced with great obstacles and who manages to overcome those great obstacles. And in Campbell's theory, that hero returns home to culture with a greater understanding and wisdom that can be shared with community. I want to relate that a little bit to the notion of time, because we all live in this thing called perpetual present time. And we come to kind of understand our lives and our life stories in relationship to time. We have experiences and the seminal moments, rituals, and action points in our life become the points by which we tether together our experience and understanding of our own story. And obviously, time becomes very important in human life. And time is also very important in the creation of theater, because we have to be aware of our audience sitting in perpetual present time, experiencing the story. So structure, as we create theater, becomes obviously super important. I also wanted to talk a little bit about memory as it relates to the kind of theater that I make. Because typically when I interview folks, I'd say the majority of the time what we're talking about is their memory, an event that happened, memory of an event that happened to someone else or in their community, or a memory of a time in their life. This is another quote from Muriel Rukeyser, and I love this quote. "In this moment, when we face horizons and conflicts wider than ever before, we want our resources, the ways of strength. We look again to the human wish, its faith, the means by which the imagination leads us to surpass ourselves." I find this inspiration in creating theater. There are some words in here that are very essential to theater, the notion of conflict, and the essential element in that conflict plays in drama, right? If there's no problem, there's no play, and that manifests itself in a kind of conflict. The human wish that Rukeyser speaks about in this quote, I equate to the notion of characters who have wants and needs and take action. Action is the essential component that actually creates the structure of drama. So it's essential to make manifest that wish or want. And finally, that the imagination leads us to surpass ourselves. I love that, because effective drama, and hopefully the drama that I'm sharing when I create theater, is an attempt to help us as individuals surpass ourselves. And in other words, transform or experience some kind of transformation to a new understanding of the topic, of the theme, of ourselves, or of other people. So theater is limitless in its ability to convey profound ideas, and it's also limitless in its ability to convey the most intimate of human experiences. And like I said, in the work that I'm doing, I'm trying to use intimate human experiences to speak to much larger, profound human, cultural, societal conditions. I'd like to just briefly take you back to 1999. I think that's the year I met Adriana Dominguez. She was a student there at UTEP, and that was my first academic appointment. And at that time, I had come from living growing up in Los Angeles and living in New York, and as a gay man who was very interested in gay culture, I was curious as to how it made itself manifest on the border, because for a very large city, the same size as Austin or the same size as Minneapolis, there was a very, to my mind initially, an absence of presence of a gay community. In 2000, I actually had the opportunity to write a grant and receive money from the Center for Inter-American Border Studies to conduct a number of interviews, which I conducted with LGBT folks living on the US-Mexico border. And I contributed those interviews to the Oral History Institute at UTEP as a means of chronicling gay life on the border. And I turned that into a play called Border Stories, and I'll get back to that in a minute, but I wanted to just talk briefly about some of the influences on this kind of work. Probably the foremost leader of this kind of work that has come to be called verbatim theater, because the artists typically speak verbatim the words of the subjects that they interview. That would be Anna Deavere Smith, who in '92 created this piece called Twilight Los Angeles that was based on the Rodney King incident, and particularly the verdict. So just briefly for folks, as a reminder for folks who don't know, Rodney King was an African-American man who was beaten by 5 white police officers in Los Angeles. And when the result of the trial was that the white officers were found not guilty, and that inspired some civil unrest in the city. So Anna Deavere Smith took it upon herself to interview individuals in the community, and she created characters that she portrayed as a means of unpacking and digesting what had happened in the city. She followed that up with a piece called Fires in the Mirror that was based on an incident that happened in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, where a young African-American boy was struck by a car that was being driven by a rabbi, actually being driven by the driver of the rabbi, but the rabbi was in the car on their way to service, and the incident caused another set of unrest in that community. I was really deeply moved by the work of my friend Mark Wolf, who created a piece in the year 2000 called Another American Asking and Telling. And for that piece, Mark interviewed LGBT folks that had served in the US military, and he portrayed a number of characters that he crafted from those interviews. This is another piece I love called The Exonerated. The Exonerated is a piece based on interviews with 6 folks who were on death row, and for each of their cases, evidence came forward that determined that they were not guilty, so they were exonerated. And the piece by Jessica Blank and Eric Jensen is a collection of interviews of those people and also real court transcripts. So all of these plays identify a problem, a social issue that bears upon the lives of people and upon the lives of characters. My story, as I mentioned, was my first play based on this kind of work was called Border Voices. This is a piece that was done in the Austin Chronicle when I first did the work with the community group in Austin. And I had the opportunity to perform this play, which came to be called Border Stories, in various venues around the country. In the year 2000, my husband showed me this article in the New York Times. And this article addressed the notion of a generation of LGBT folks that had finally come to a place in their life where they were experiencing some of the civil liberties enjoyed by other folks in the population, only to end up in nursing homes and other facilities where they were experiencing prejudice and homophobia. This piece moved me very much as a gay man. You know, on a personal level, made me start thinking about what the future would be like for me. So I interviewed folks from various parts of the country, and I created a piece called When We Danced. These are some images of when I performed that piece in a workshop production at Company of Angels in Los Angeles. This is another piece that I made. I did not perform in that piece, but I became very interested in seeing if I could create a piece based on interviews that was a multi-actor piece. So as an homage to my grandmother, who was a great storyteller, I made this piece called Cuentos de Josefina. I went down to the border region and into Mexico, and I interviewed folks about family folkloric tales and legends, and that piece was created. And of course, any good piece about legend and Mexican culture has to do with Dia de los Muertos, and of course, La Llorona appears in the climax of the play. So we come full circle, in a sense, back to El Paso in 2020, this year, where I had the opportunity to go back again to create a new piece. I love El Paso, and El Paso is a very special place. I think of it as America's best kept secret because it's such a really beautiful and special community. Those of you who live there know that to be true. After the events that took place in August of 2019, I was talking to my good friend Yvonne Carranza, and she was sort of, you know, we hadn't talked in a while, and she was on a very personal level talking about her experience. And as she was talking, she really inspired me to use this as an inspiration to create this latest play. I wasn't so much interested in the actual event that happened, although of course that's important to the storytelling, but I was really, really interested in the community response. And what I came to understand as I talked to people was that the community response was based on a story that had started long before the events of August 3rd, 2019. It's a story that has to do with this ongoing struggle that we have in this country around immigration, about how we treat immigrants in this country, about the notion of borders and how we construct borders and uphold and sometimes challenge borders, about gun control and the reality that this country still struggles with the ability to effectively deal with this issue that affects so many human lives. And the story also involves the notion of this rise of white supremacy, which we've seen over the last number of years in the West and in America, and how we give space to or don't give space to folks that feel that they are justified in taking action based on prejudices and racism. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the notion of this technological world that we live in today. This is an excerpt from the so-called manifesto that the alleged shooter at the Walmart of last year posted on a site called 8chan. This site was also a site where the New Zealand shooter and the Northern California shooter of the Garlic Festival posted manifestos prior to their exacting violence upon communities. So these various spheres are kind of important touch points for me as we create this kind of work. The personal narrative that explores and explains social issues which become political. I've come to feel that fundamentally all theater, no matter how it manifests itself, is political, because it is either corroborating or challenging the ideas and dreams or ideals that we hold as societies and as nations. And also this notion of transformation, that the hope is that there's a cathartic experience for audiences so that they come to a new understanding of something. Okay, I am going to stop sharing now. And in the next little segment, if you'll indulge me, I'm just going to read a couple of monologues. I think in the interest of time, what I'd like to do is just focus on the monologues from the new piece, which is, the working title is The El Paso Play. For those folks who are in El Paso, this is sort of a disclaimer, or no, what's that called? Just a notice, an adviso, that the stories here address the incident that happened. And if anyone is sensitive to that, and any content comes up that is sensitive for you, I certainly understand if you want to take a break and come back. The material is very personal. It's personal for me, and I know it's personal for a lot of you. The first, so I will say before I read these that the characters are forming, and I don't quite know, they're clearly real life people in the community. And I think just for the purposes today, I'm going to tell you the type of character they are rather than giving them their real name. So the first character I'm going to read is a male journalist. And he says, please hold. So the male journalist says, to understand El Paso, I think the biggest issue is our geographic isolation, right? Which has both its benefits and its drawbacks. El Paso and Juarez are both far away from their national capitals, far away from their state capitals. The nearest large city to El Paso is Albuquerque, 4 hours away. The nearest large Texas city is San Antonio, which is 6 or 7 hours away, and similar things play out for Juarez. So we're very isolated, and often because of that isolation, cut off from the decision-making that influences us. So we're cut off largely from media centers that shape the narrative about who we are. The plus to that is that being so isolated, we really live in a bubble here. It's a very pleasant place to live. The people are friendly, and we sometimes can tune out the pressures that people outside the region face, like the virulent strains of racism in America. El Paso is 83% a Hispanic community. You don't see people here being vocal in a racist manner. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't exist. It exists to some degree, but maybe we don't see it in the same way you'd see it in other cities. And we all feel like we're in it together. That bubble has served us well and created this sense of security, this sense of camaraderie. But, that got destroyed on August 3rd. And part of why that shooting hurt so much is because that sense of security that we had, that we're isolated, but we like each other, that we get along, that was erased. When that guy drove 10 hours here to murder Mexicans. The next character is a female professor and mom. And my first thought was, it can't be somebody from here. There is no way we would do that to each other. And I'm really sadly grateful that I was right. But that someone planned, that he drove 10 hours, that along the way he must have stopped, snacked, refilled on gas, drove, stopped, refilled on gas, snacked, peed, and after every stop, he just kept going. He still thought, yes, I'm going to just continue driving west and I'm going to do this. He made a real effort. He planned. He drove hours, with a weapon and ammunition specifically to a place populated by brown people. It's unbelievable to think that someone thinks that I and people who look like me, my daughter, don't have the right, don't belong, that we're worthless. They feel they have the right. Someone, because of the hate that is being fueled constantly, they made a concerted effort. It was not random, is what I'm saying. It was an act of racism, a racist attack on our community. The next voice is also another female professor who's a social scientist. People started texting their families. Where are you at? That's immediately, people's need to count each other. Where are you? To take inventory, to take stock of family members. my child was with me, and my husband called from home and said, don't move, don't go anywhere, I'm coming to get you. That sudden panic of don't move, don't go out, there's somebody killing people. And then as things transpired, we come to learn there's this young man that came to us from 10 hours, far from us. You know, that he drove west and came to this Walmart. People in the mall were screaming and crying, and word had spread that he was there, but he was not at Cielo Vista Mall. He was inside the Walmart, and this is the Mexicanos Walmart. It's where the people come from Chihuahua to shop. It's so central to the Free Bridge. It's like the Free Bridge empties into this part of town. And so there were a lot of Mexicanos at Walmart from Chihuahua and even some from other parts of Mexico. This person came here to hunt Chicanos, Mexican Americans, and also Mexicanos. And what's really ironic is the idea that people come to the United States to feel safe here, that they're escaping the violence of Chihuahua or Juarez, or for the hours that they're in El Paso, there's order, not violence. They say, aquí vinimos y sentimos seguros. This is where they come to shop and to do what they can with their hard-earned money. Another voice, a female PhD student. It was very hard to learn that some of the victims were from Mexico. These people didn't come here to take nobody's place. They were legal and they were just shopping, you know? And in order to, let me tell you something. In order to come here to buy a tennis shoes or something from Walmart, first, you have to earn Mexican money, which usually is very bad pay, you know? And secondly, you have to look where to exchange your Mexican, your pesos to dollars in order to have a nice time to come here to Walmart and leave the product of your hard work here in the United States. So nobody deserved to die the way they died, those people. They were tourists. They were, I mean, this is really, really unfair. And that is why I am saying the man who planned this and killed didn't have anything to do with a psychiatric disorder. And I can tell you about that because most of my work, it was in the psychiatric hospitals in Mexico City. So I know about psychiatric disorders. For the probably last 20 years, I've been working around mental health and mental disorders. Don't stigmatize people who have psychiatric disorders, because in general, people who suffer from some type of psychosis, psychosis, they will hurt themselves 10 times before they hurt you or someone else. That is why it is so dangerous to dismiss the lack of morality and label it as, okay, that person has a mental issue. No, not really. This was a planning, not only by him, but by a group of people that were on that side. And they encouraged him to do what he did. This is the voice of a male counselor. If you look at evolutionary psychology, it's like tribalism, right? So like tribalism is intended, it's intended evolutionary adaptation to survive. So like in our prehistory, when we didn't have all this, technology, when we didn't live together the way we live now, you had to protect your family. So that was your tribe, and so other was different. It was like outside the tribe. That biology we inherited, we've now transcended it, right? From a neurological perspective, we have a prefrontal cortex, and we have all these abilities to think beyond our basic survival instincts. But the tribal instinct has survived and adapted, and you see it play out in economics, in the way it's validated through the criminal justice system, right? In how laws are interpreted. Even when you have evidence such as overall, immigrants are much less violent. They're much less likely to commit crimes compared to US citizens because they want to be here and they feel more vulnerable. Even though that data is overwhelmingly robust, people will say, oh, they're dangerous. Well, that is a remnant of tribalism. Racism is tribalism. So I'm a part of, I'm a part of this network of mental health professionals in the community. So, that next Sunday, okay, there was this big email that was sent out to everyone who was licensed to come and help out. Like, people like me went to the hospitals. We went to, I went to an ICU, a waiting area, and there was this feeling of hopelessness because you can't really, there's not much you can do. Psychological first aid is just about being there for people. But you really, their family members are there and they're waiting. They're waiting. They're hoping that, they're waiting for the surgeon to come and tell them that their family member is either going to survive or they're not going to survive. And there's so many people there trying to help, and you feel just helpless because, like, okay, this one individual was in surgery and we waited, and then the doctors came and they told the family they didn't make it. And I don't know, I just stayed there all day, but the whole like the trauma of the city, collective trauma, it was like overwhelming. But you can't ignore the other part of it, right? Like gun violence and gun control and immigration and racism and prejudice, right? Because when you hear the story of this individual, this young man that drove here 10 hours from a suburb near Dallas, and he wanted to kill as many Mexicans as he could. There's no other different way to say what happened. That's what it was. And since then I've talked to some people, and that guy came, and I don't think, how do you process that, right? I don't think maybe some of us have really been able to process that, why would someone do that? And how can they do that? And how is that something that we just kind of move past? Okay, I'm going to stop the reading there and kind of conclude this portion. And those are the works in progress from the new piece. And I think we have a little bit of time for discussion. So I guess I'm just letting it land. So I guess what I'm saying is, if anyone has any questions or comments on the presentation or the reading, we can just take a little time and discuss.
Absolutely, and thank you, Greg, and all of you that have joined us. If you just joined us a little while ago, please feel free. There's a little bit more than 20 of us, so feel free to just unmute yourself and engage in conversation, or if you're not comfortable with that and you want to pose a question or a thought in the chat, please feel free to do that, and Kim or myself will communicate that to Greg. And I'll give you all the first opportunity to do that.
Hi, my name's Chris. Can I join in? Awesome. I'm a new colleague with Greg at the University of Redlands. And, so it's wonderful to get to know you as an artist, not only as a chair, and really enjoyed your presentation. I loved your readings. I had the great good fortune of directing a production at the University of Redlands of Twilight in Los Angeles, and that that kind of work is so moving. And one of the questions I have, I loved your readings and I love where this is going. So immediate and important. Thank you. What is it like to be the playwright interviewer and go into the room with people who have been through these sort of traumatic moments and incidents? And how do you come up with your questions? I think of the Laramie Project, and I think of a team of people going on. It sounds like this is very individual. And you know, how do you invite yourself into these individuals' lives, and when and how do you formulate the questions that prompt their responses?
Hi, Chris, and thanks for that question. Well, wow, it's tough, right? This particular play, of course, is really tough. Probably the most emotionally challenging piece that I've worked on. But what I found across the board is that when people are ready to talk, and I will just say parenthetically that, you know, I went to El Paso and there were a lot of people who would not talk to me. No Walmart employee would talk to me. The few families that I could get close to that had been directly impacted by that shooting were not ready to talk to me. And I completely understand that, you know, but the folks, all of us, you know, it kind of harkens back to the first part of my little presentation. We are story creatures, and we all have stories, and we need to talk. We need to communicate our experiences, and we need to communicate our fears, and the, you know, we're all searching for that resolution, a return to equilibrium on the spiritual level, or on the, you know, day-to-day, I would say day-to-day level, right? Life is tough. So all that's to say, the people that were willing to talk, I found really had stuff to say. They were hurt, they were angry, they were, I don't want to say confused, but struggling to come to terms with what this all means, right? Like not just as a this happened to our community or this happened to people I know, but the notion that we live in a world, and we know this cerebrally, like, and I can speak for myself. Oh, the shooting stuff, I knew it cerebrally, and I had a response to shootings that we've seen happen over the last number of years. But when it's close to home, it's like, how do we live in a world where this could actually take place, where someone would do this to other people? So all that's to say that I see myself as a receptor to these stories, and a willingness to hear. I've been told I'm a good listener, and I hope that that's true. So my job is to establish a relationship with someone, you know, the interviewee, and really communicate to them early on that I'm a good listener, and that their stories are safe with me, that I will honor their story. I have to just give a shout out to Georgina Escobar, who has joined us. Georgina, for those of you who don't know, is an awesome theater artist and playwright, and currently down at the University of Texas at El Paso. And I was lucky enough, like privileged enough, along with Adriana and the wonderful, amazingly talented Ivan Carranza Rolf, who I see there on my screen, all folks who I had the pleasure of mentoring to some degree back in the day, who have gone on to do amazing, incredible work. And I'm just so, like, I bask in the glory of their, like, woman creative energy. Amazing, amazing people.
Thank you, Greg. I was gonna jump on to what Christopher was asking, but also just to honor you and thank you, because I was just posting on Facebook that the first playwriting class I took was with you. And I guess going off of what you're saying and creating this safe space, you did the same for us in class, which was so important. And I think, you know, you realized quickly that it was mostly Latinos in there, and you were so smart about letting us feel, you know, that safe space and writing from our stories and what we know, but also the ability to imagine what we don't know, which was really strong. But I remember something that you said in that class, and I take it with me always, where you said a play starts at a moment where a character can literally say, before this happened to me, I was this person. after this happened to me, I'm this person, and like this, like just centrifugal moment. And so just in hearing your writing here, and the fact that this is unfortunately inspired by actual true, you know, events, it's just, it brings me back to that moment of like people's lives being forever changed, and the power that lies in drama for us as writers to really zone in on that and see what is it, what changed, and how did it change, and how does that change manifest on stage. And so I thank you for that, Jem, and for what you're doing now too. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for the work that you're doing. Such great contributions. I have a you know, interesting little, as Georgina was talking, I thought of the, you know, I'll share a little something about my past and my, the kind of, I don't know, value of being able to spend time on the border for me on a personal level. So my maternal grandfather was born in Jimenez in the state of Chihuahua in Mexico. And the story is that when he was orphaned, interestingly, orphaned at the age of 10 due to a pandemic, right? There was a pandemic and his parents both died from an influenza. And they lost everything. A relative took over the rancho that they lived on in Jimenez, and he and his siblings were forced to leave, and they traveled north. You know, it's the quintessential immigrant story, coming to the country with nothing. And in my mind, my grandfather went through what he went through so that I could have the privilege to show up and wear a tie, you know. And I would have these conversations with my my students, and I would say, if someone would say, why are you dressed up today? And I would say, well, I'm wearing a tie because my grandfather and the folks that came before me did what they did and suffered and worked hard, like literally worked and worked and worked day in and day out, so that their future generations could, you know, like make a living and have a respectful life. And I wore that tie in honor. But I think back to those first years of my teaching at UTEP and the amazing students that were there and the amazing community that I came to learn. So I just wanted to add that this creating this piece for me is kind of an ongoing homage to my heritage and that particular geographical space, which is just, you know, sacred in so many ways. Any other questions from anyone?
Hey, Gregory, I'll come in.
So
I'm Katie Goff. We've got like all of the Gregory love. I'm a former colleague. We've got the present and the past. So greetings from Vermont. So I may have missed this. Your readings were incredibly moving. And since you were on sabbatical while this was taking place, I've been so curious about what you found out. But I'm also curious to hear, since you talk about Anna Devere Smith, if you or another solo performer will be doing all of the work, or if different actors and actresses will be doing the work, if you're going to give it to characters in a way, and what you see as the differences between those choices.
Thank you for that question. Without getting to it, okay, so here's the thing. The solo performance, I mean, acting's hard, right? Acting's hard, period. That's the lesson for the day. Acting's hard, period. Solo performance is terrifying, right? And I did my share of solo performance, and as I think of this piece, I really would like to craft it for a group of actors. In fact, on the 26th of this month, Company of Angels, a theater company in LA who's been very good to me, is assembling a group of actors, 10 actors who are going to read the current draft of the play in this format. And all that's to say, there's really no, like, if I cast it with 10 actors, there's really no role in it for me. And I just don't think I'm in a place in my life where I want to craft it as a solo performance piece. I, I just don't know that I have the, I don't know that that's frankly what it wants to be.
Yeah.
And there's also something about, because community is so important, I really envision all, you know, about 10 bodies on stage representative of community. And in its current form, 6 of those actors play one character each, and 4 actors play multiple different characters. So yeah, that's the direction it's going. Although I love my Anna Devere Smith and my, you know, Mark Wolves and other solo performance artists, my Tim Millers and others. Maybe one day.
Will Company of Angels be doing it on sort of video style like this, or is it private?
You know, that's a good question. I think the original intention was just for the playwright to hear it, but we'll see. We'll see where we are. If we end up opening it up, I'll let folks know.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a few minutes.
Yes, we have about 5 minutes. So if there's any last questions or thoughts.
Wait, pause. Is that Craig I see over there? Hi, Craig.
That's Craig Wells.
Craig.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's my husband, Craig Wells.
Hi, good to see you.
Thank you. It's good to see you all as well.
I just wanted to say that I was so blessed to be a part of that original group with Adriana and Georgina, to have Gregory Ramos as a professor, and a lot of, you are a good listener, Greg, because I remember telling you so many stories about my life, and he would just listen, and then he would say, you know, there's a play in there, and he would just, I know, and then I think one of the stories ended up in your play, but
yes,
but just your ability to listen and just to hear that the story that's not being told, like the story that's in the story, that's not actually being told. And I know that it helped me. I went on not into theater, but into administration, which was using theater. We're acting every day in, but using the students as a way to recruit other students and telling their stories. And I just said a lot of that was from you listening to what they're not saying and getting that out of them. And you taught me that, just how to listen for the story and where is the story. And you're just amazing. So thank you for everything you taught me and all the rest of my colleagues here who were with me in those classes. So
thank you. That's so great to hear. Thanks, Yvonne. I'm putting my, there was a question in the chat, and it was about how to keep up with me. And so I have this website, and it's pretty easy to remember. Let's see. Oh, no. I wanted to, anyway, GregoryRamos.com. So you can people can follow me if you want. So Priscilla, yes, thank you, Priscilla. There it is. Okay. Any other questions? We're about at time, but we have time for one more question if anyone has anything they'd like to share. My dream is one day to present this play in El Paso, so hopefully when it's ready, there's a group of actors down there somewhere that might be interested in giving this to the community.
Oh yeah, there's many actors here.
I think you could find a few.
Yeah, I think there's a few around.
A little handful.
Yeah, a whole
Awesome.
department worth of them.
Beautiful.
How are you doing it in Redlands?
How
Now
am I
that
doing?
you've moved down there?
Great. You know, it's like being, oh, now we can just like chat. It's good. It's, you know, I'm from LA, so it's close to LA. It's like being home, and I'm very familiar with it. I'm very fortunate that I really like my new colleagues. It's a smaller department than I've worked in before, but they're super people. And, you know, so far you know, we're living in this weird virtual world, and I'm teaching courses, I'm teaching a directing class and an actors lab class online. So that's always kind of like, what is this? But so far so good. The students are great, and I'm feeling like it's a great new chapter. So thank you for asking.
And then since we're chatting, Greg, just a last thought, and I think you talked a lot about it in your presentation, is doing work that really solidifies and explores identity. And I think for myself, that was integral because I didn't have those opportunities. Yeah, it was like, Greg was the only one offering shows that a brown girl could be in and could really invite her family to, because then my abwe could understand.
Totally.
So thank you for that. And I think that really set up the work that I want to do, because I think that's really important. We want to make sure that students just don't have, this is all you can do. And if you don't fit into that, you're excluded from this experience. That there's so much more. And I think, as we're commenting with Georgina with us, allowing those students to tell their own stories has been huge. I mean, we have students writing and telling, and that's so important. And so it's amazing and sad in one way that it's taken a really long time to get there, but amazing that you were really a catalyst for that.
Thank you. So this is a good point about, because we were hoping to weave in the topic of representation, but I think I would summarize it like this. We have to create the work, right? A lot of my, in retrospect, I realize a lot of the reason I created my own work and did solo performance work is because I didn't fit in anywhere. It's like there was no, I was in West Side Story, and I was, it's like I did a kooky Latin character on some like TV pilot, and it was these very sort of extreme, sort of limited spaces where I could like be an artist back in the day. Hopefully things are changing. I mean, I think we're having those conversations anyway, right? But the response is always just create the work. And look at that. With that, I guess we're at time.
Indeed.
Is that cool?
Yeah.
Kim or Adriana, anything to add?
So much. So it was a lovely conversation, and it was wonderful to see your work.
Okay. Well, again, go ahead.
Same time next week?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes, a series seminar.
Yeah, this is great. Beats work.
Thank you.
Awesome. No, thank you, Greg. Thank you all. We do have some amazing speakers coming up. We have next week and the week after on Wednesdays. And so everything also is recorded. So if you missed a bit of this or you want to revisit it, it'll be on our website, hopefully within a couple of days. And we're going to be posting our other speakers as well. So I thank you, Greg, for giving your time and your talent and your love. And again, I just love the magical world of theater, made that beautiful circle. Because I even see one of our students who was in Real Women Have Curves that I directed this year.
Hey!
Yeah,
awesome.
It's magical and crazy like that, so I love it.
I love it too. Okay, sending you all lots of love. Be well, be healthy.
You too. Thank you all.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.